Imagine for a moment that you are the architect of a monolithic financial empire. You've spent a grueling decade in the trenches of capitalism, eating glass and staring at spreadsheets until your eyes bled. You sacrificed your 20s, alienated your friends, and developed a mild caffeine addiction, all to build something real. You nurtured capital, ruthlessly refined your strategy in the crucible of the market, and built intricate moats around your assets. You are finally gloriously profitable. You are the king of your particular hill. Then, on a whimsical Tuesday, guided by nothing more than a vague surplus of serotonin, you decide to bring on a co-founder. Not just an employee, a full partner. You slide a contract across the mahogany table. This document is breathtaking in its stupidity. It grants this new person, someone you've perhaps known for 18 months socially, unrestricted, unmonitored access to the company's primary bank accounts. It instantly gives them 50% equity in everything you have painstakingly built over the last 10 years, every late night, every skipped meal, every drop of sweat equity, halved instantly. Furthermore, it grants them 50% of everything you will ever generate in the future, regardless of their contribution to that future output. But wait, it gets worse. You also agree to a termination clause straight out of a corporate nightmare. If this partner decides to leave the company, for any reason, or perhaps for no reason at all other than they grew bored or found a shinier opportunity elsewhere, they can liquidate half the cash reserves, demand a fire sale of half the intellectual property, and potentially force you, via court order, to pay them a substantial salary for years after they have ceased doing any work for the firm. And the cherry on top of this poison sundae? You didn't run a background check. You have zero visibility into their financial history. You never saw a credit report, never verified their assets, and never asked about their outstanding debts or bankruptcy history. You signed the deal of the century because they had a nice smile and you just had a really good feeling about them during happy hour. If you pulled a stunt like this in the actual business world, your board of directors wouldn't just fire you. They would sue you for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. You would be laughed out of every venture capital office from Sand Hill Road to Wall Street. You would be branded as reckless, incompetent, and economically suicidal. Yet, millions of otherwise rational, intelligent human beings do this exact same thing every single year, with smiles on their faces and confetti in the air. We just don't call it a disastrous corporate merger. We call it marriage. We live in an era obsessed with financial optimization. We agonize over basis points in our expense ratios. We debate asset allocation strategies endlessly on Reddit forums, and we track our net worth daily on colorful apps. Yet, we systematically ignore the single legal contract that possesses the sheer statistical probability to destroy more accumulated wealth in one afternoon in family court than the Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, and the dot-com crash combined could destroy in a decade. I'm diabolical invests, and I spend way too much time in the dark corners of the financial world, dissecting the invisible, systemic risks that threaten to wipe out the wealth of the unsuspecting middle class. If you're someone currently blinded by love and thinking about getting married, or if you're already entrenched in the marital battlefield fighting about money, or even if you're single and just trying to build an empire without it getting burned to the ground by a future mistake, you need to pay attention. We are taking the romance out of the equation. We're putting dopamine on hold. We're going to look at the institution of marriage through the cold, unforgiving, fluorescent lens of forensic accounting. We're going to discuss the spend or risk, the absolutely terrifying mathematics of modern divorce, and why the person you choose to wake up next to is statistically about 10 times more important to your ultimate net worth than the performance of the S&P 500. Here is the fundamental truth about marriage that nobody has the guts to tell you during the engagement party toasts. In the eyes of the state, which is the third party in your bedroom, whether you like it or not, marriage is not a mystical union of two souls meant to be together forever. It is a financial partnership. It is a cold, legal merger of two distinct economic entities. When you say, "I do," you are not just reciting poetry. You're triggering a massive, complex cascade of tax laws, property laws, and liability statutes that legally bind you to another human being's financial behavior, past, present, and future. For centuries, marriage was explicitly a transaction. It was about consolidating land, forging alliances between families, and ensuring inheritances. It's only in the last nanosecond of human history that we decided to layer enormous romantic expectations on top of what is essentially an economic contract. The problem is, the law still views it mostly as a contract. Most people spend more time reading the terms and conditions of a new iOS update than they do understanding the state laws that will govern their marriage contract. They walk in blind, high on biology's potent love cocktails, completely ignoring the balance sheet implications. This deliberate ignorance is dangerous because financial incompatibility is the silent killer of wealth generation. We are fed this Hollywood nonsense that opposites attract. Maybe that works for movie tastes or pizza toppings. But in finance, opposites do not attract. They attack. They erode. They destroy. If you are a natural saver, someone who derives a sense of safety and deep satisfaction from liquidity, delayed gratification, and the magic of compounding interest, and you marry a natural spender, someone who receives a dopamine hit solely from the act of consumption and views money as a replenishable resource meant to be burned, you're not just entering a challenging relationship. You are entering a decades-long war of attrition where your own household is the battlefield. Let's look at the mathematics of what I call the slow death. This is what happens when a saver marries a spender and stays married. It isn't an immediate explosion. It's far more insidious. It is a slow, agonizing bleed that prevents you from ever reaching financial escape velocity. Let's hypothetically say you were disciplined before the marriage. You are managing to save a respectable $20,000 a year. If you invest that over 30 years at an average 8% market return, you end up with over $2.2 million. You are a multimillionaire just by staying the course. But then you marry someone who believes that money constitutes energy that needs to flow. They don't have a gambling addiction or a drug problem. Nothing that dramatic. They just like nice things. They rationalize leasing a luxury SUV every 3 years because of safety and status. They insist that the 3-star hotel isn't good enough and upgrade to the 5-star resort on credit. They buy lunch out every single day because packing a lunch is depressing. They shower friends and family with lavish gifts to buy affection. These thousands of micro-decisions add up. Let's say their habits bleed an extra $15,000 a year out of the household cash flow compared to your previous lifestyle. Now, your household savings rate plummets from $20,000 down to $5,000 a year. Run the math on that. Saving $5,000 a year for 30 years at the same 8% interest gets you about $560,000. The spender tax in that marriage just cost you nearly $1.7 million in lost future wealth. You didn't lose that money in a dramatic divorce settlement. You didn't lose it in a market crash. You lost it because your partner's consumption habits acted as a parasitic drag on your compounding mechanism for 3 decades. You were desperately trying to fill a bucket with a teaspoon while the person you love was drilling holes in the bottom with a power drill. The psychological toll of this dynamic is even more devastating than the math. If you're the saver, you become the villain in your own home. You become the no police, the buzzkill, the miser who doesn't want anyone to have fun.